Hello and welcome to part 2 of chapter 16, Morals and Motivation. And we'll just do 2 slides on the section. And this first one is what we might call ethical egoism. And that is, for those of us who are students of economics, individualism. And the idea that it's a moral obligation to pursue individual interests regardless upon their impact upon others. So a true follower of ethical egoism would not be necessarily concerned about externalities, especially the negative ones. In neoclassical economics, this can lead to the best outcome for society under the right conditions. Those conditions are the special circumstance of perfect competition, and everybody is responding to the signal of market prices, and that is going to lead to exactly what society wants in terms of widgets to be produced or apples to be done or any such things like that. And the market prices is going to allocate who to whom is going to buy the goods based on willingness to pay, and then to whom that is going to sell the goods based upon the minimum cost that is justified under competition. Everybody's pursuing their own selfish ills, and the idea of the invisible hand will make sure that the proper allocation is done for everybody. However, as again, students of economics know, and especially microeconomics, there is the idea of the prisoner's dilemma, which shows the tension between cooperation and competition. In the prisoner's dilemma idea, which we've gone through in this course, you have 2 prisoners and they're separated, and they will both rat on each other to pursue their own selfish interests, but that would go against the idea of the group. So they'll sacrifice themselves for the group, and both of them will be made worse off. And this is the idea of the Nash equilibrium. And your book talks about the case of the go-kart track, which is personal desire versus the impact upon others. Let's see. It may be the case that a go-kart. Okay. All right. Suppose that several parcels of land lie along a road in a county with no zoning ordinances or restrictions upon use. Should a go-kart track be erected on one of the parcels, the property values of the other parcels could fall precipitously due to objectionable noise and air pollution. The go-kart race engine is very loud and very, very annoying. Acting selfishly, the ethical egoist might be inclined to make the socially inefficient decision to build a track even if the neighbor's losses would exceed the track owner's personal gain. So society does not benefit, even though the individual is indeed benefited from the action. Okay, now utilitarianism. This ethical theory comes from John Stuart Mill in the 18th century, and he said that utilitarianism is a moral obligation to steward the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So equal consideration for everyone involved before a decision is made. And this is John Stuart Mill, and this is also Jeremy Bentham. Here, rather than downplaying externalities as advocated by ethical egoism, Mill wrote that the liberty of the individual must be thus far limited. He or she must not make himself a nuisance to other people. So you're considering yourself and you're considering others under utilitarianism. Now, this can lead to an unjust distribution of resources, though. Your book talks about if rich, healthy, and young people were found to receive more utility per dollar spent cleaning up nearby toxic dump sites rather than poor, sick, or older people, no dump sites would be cleaned up near the homes of the latter group until every site has been cleared up near all of the former groups. So aggregate utility would be achieved, but there would still be severe inequality under this outcome of utilitarianism. And this is certainly something that we see all around us, where the rich people get resources first, and if they could potentially buy off the poor folk, then under this standard, the decision should be made, and theoretically all are made better off. Now, there are some big differences between what's called egalitarian, Rawlsian, and utilitarian. Egalitarian would be a strict 50-50 split of utility between the various parties. A Rawlsian approach, after John Rawls, he advocated a maxi-min approach that targets utility improvements for those who are worst off. So you devote resources to better the life of the poor and downtrodden first, and to continue to do so until they are as well off as the rich and wealthy. So, and then finally, utilitarianism. The goal is the same, but you start first maybe with the benefit of all. And you're looking at the aggregate utility, not necessarily just yourself. But again, it's subject to the problem that I just mentioned about rich, healthy, and young folk. Now, the graphs to the right show the distinction between the three. I'll do my best to explain to the extent that I can understand this. In the top curve, we have the distinction between two individuals, in all three cases, Artemis and Brutus. If we were talking, what is it? Strict ethical egoism, they would be at points A and B prime. E would be strictly egalitarian, and then R would be Rawlsian, because you are looking at the well-being of the least well-off individual. In the second graph, we have a situation where it's almost what one might be calling a zero-sum game. My gain is your loss. As Brutus is gaining more utility, Brutus gains it at the expense of Artemis. So you have that kind of, not an inverted U, but it's kind of a bowed out shape there, and that shows exactly a zero-sum game. The final one, the bottom curve, could resemble the utility distributions between environmentalists and developers, and is in essence a trade-off of common resources. So as you're going from, let's say, B prime to B, Brutus is made well off a little bit, but Artemis is made off. But as you continue, then you're depleting the common resource, and then neither Brutus or Artemis they're both in essence being made worse off by the depletion of the common resource. So this is classic trade-off of the common resources. For more detail, please look at your book, and there's more detail on explaining these three graphs. And this is going to end part 2 of this chapter.